Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Guys, today we wanted to react. There were three players who made some different comments, whether on social media, whether to the media, and we want to kind of react to each and every one because I think they are very telling in a lot of ways, Derek, and it's what Colts Nation's been kind of talking about in the last couple of days. And so want to highlight three different players that had some comments to say. The first one we're going to talk about has to be Deforest Buckner. And obviously, Derek, you heard what Deforest Buckner said, a few days ago about the Colts defense and, saying things such as he believes that this is the worst defensive season the Colts have produced since he's been here. 11 individuals out there. It was everybody, and he takes part ownership as a leader. And he was asked, Derek, about kind of the lack of cohesion, obviously with the Colts bringing back all those guys from a season prior. And he actually interrupted the comment, and his comment to that was very interesting. He said ego. Ego was the big thing that DeForest Buckner pointed to when it came to what the problem was for the Indianapolis Colts. Just players focusing on themselves, focusing on their individual, accolades and stuff. And obviously fans, and, we probably will too, have drawn their conclusions on who he might be talking about, of course. And what were your takeaways, Derek? And I'm sure there's some other things as well DeForest Buckner said that I didn't even mention, but those were kind of some of the highlights. What's your takeaway from what Buckner had said? And kind of, this was obviously before Gus Bradley got fired. So what are your take here on what DeForest Buckner said and all the stuff around just the defense right now and kind of the state of chaos it kind of finds itself in right now?
I think another important thing too was another comment that Buckner had made about, I think it was complacency. And I think it was Buckner that said it, where, you brought all of these guys back. That was Ballard's angle, right? That last year, we brought all of these guys back, we signed all these guys to extensions, right? So, it's the exact same defense. No new names, no big names, no new faces, all that stuff. So in a way, it's like, hey, it's everybody saying, you're trying to reward guys that, do their jobs, right? Well, when you start doing that, it starts to create a dynamic where guys just weren't playing as hard at times or weren't preparing as hard as they should. And the reason why, and it's the same argument, Cody, why everyone says these athletes shouldn't be getting paid the way that they do. Because what happens when they get paid? A lot of times they disappear or their production slips. That happens a lot, especially in some of these premier positions or even in positions where, guys don't genuinely make a ton of money. They play really freaking hard to win that money. And when they win that money, it's all of a sudden like they don't give the same effort anymore. And in a way, this is kind of what happened here where, he said that guys were complacent, guys weren't having to really fight for their jobs. And that's where you say the ego thing kind of came into play. Like, hey, I made it big. I got money. I got paid. I'm the top dog, all this other stuff, right? And then, that's what you get. You get a lot of guys always going about me. Not about I'm going to give everything I got for this team, despite the fact that now I don't have to worry about money anymore, right? So that's what was one of the big comments about it was, hey, like the egos are starting to get really big, and I that definitely scares me because it just adds into again why the defense has continuously gotten worse as time's gone along, even though all these guys are getting paid all this big money from Ballard. Again, it's the lack of accountability. As much as Steichen says that they do preach accountability, they don't. They're not really preaching the right kind of accountability.
Well, you can preach it all you want, but you have to practice what you preach. And it's very obvious the Colts, at least on the defensive side of the ball, they did not practice that at all. It wasn't a thing. And, I was listening to Kevin Bowen's podcast today a little bit, Derek, about it. I thought he brought up a good point that we haven't touched on. Also, when you look at Chris Ballard, he hasn't brought in competition for these guys. I mean, Derek, when you look at it, when we were talking about kind of looking at this defense this year, I mean, very rarely did we actually talk about a legitimate like starting competition, right? We talked a lot about, backup guys and all that kind of stuff, but very rarely did we talk about like, hey, there were some guys that are going to have to fight it out, like, for example, and I know obviously it didn't work out this way, but like the AD Mitchell and Alec Pierce thing, obviously we saw, Derek, how that made Alec Pierce rise to the occasion, and I think have a really nice season for the Colts.
Mhm.
But you didn't see that on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, like you said, these guys got paid and they had real no threat to their jobs, right? There was nobody else in the wings that was going to potentially push them for any playing time. So that goes back to that. Like, you didn't add true competition in there that if a player is playing bad, for example, if one of your linebackers is missing all these tackles, you don't have another guy that can truly step in there, right? Or, for example, if your starting free safety gets injured at the beginning of the season, as Julian Blackmon did, who do you have that can realistically step in there? And Julian Blackmon has to kind of just keep playing on that. And to his credit, he did. But you know what I mean? Like, you didn't have any real competition. You didn't have any really quality depth there. So it led to complacency. And I think it blew up in your face in a lot of ways where guys got comfortable, like you said. Some guys got paid. Their egos kept building and building. And like Buckner and so many others have said, it was just becoming a lot less about the team and more about individual accolades. And, the football is the ultimate team sport. And if you start focusing on me all the time, it's not going to go well for your team. If that's your primary focus is on your own personal accolades. So, yeah, 100%. And that's very telling, Derek, for a guy that's been here as long as he has in DeForest Buckner. Buckner doesn't often just come out and say these type of things just to say them, Derek. Like, Buckner's a lead by example type of guy. He's not going to come out and talk. But it seems like there are some players that maybe do that a little bit more, Derek. And it's like, I mean, to steal the old, cliche phrase, actions do speak louder than words. And the Colts' words have been a lot louder than their actions, clearly, from what we've seen by the defensive performance this last year. And, obviously you look at some of the stats, the missed tackles are the big one. And Derek, I don't know if you saw this stat or not, but both Colts starting linebackers, were right there at the top for missed tackles. Both of them, 4 linebackers, were, I think, 1 and 2. Which is kind of crazy. That tells the story right there. And it's not just the linebackers. I mean, it's throughout the defense. Just complacency and just a lack of accountability. And I think Buckner speaks to it well. And, if the Colts, Buckner's like one of their core pillars. And if he's saying that, I think that tells you a lot about where the current state of the defense is and really the state of the culture is right now for the Indianapolis Colts. I wanted to kind of talk about also Michael Pittman Jr. just recently talked to the media as well. He spoke to the media yesterday as well. And this was a little bit about what Pittman had to say. I'll quote this. This shout out Noah Compton had this. It said, "Everybody wants to be a dog until it's time to start doing dog stuff." And he referenced a few players that he said deserve his best even when he doesn't feel up to it. And obviously, Derek, we know about the back injury to Michael Pittman, how he played through that. And I think that changed a lot of people's perceptions who maybe were kind of down on Pittman, seeing that he played through that. And yeah, it wasn't a great season for Pittman, but he knew that, he had these guys that were counting on him and he didn't want to let them down. But, the players that he did reference, I just want to just real quickly, 56, 28, and 99. Obviously, you talk about Nelson, Taylor, and Buckner. So those were kind of 3 of the players, and fans kind of were like, well, what are the players that he didn't mention? Because you can mention players, but what about the players that you didn't mention, right, as well? And people drew a lot of conclusions on why he did that, and maybe it was a little bit of overreading that. But what were some of your takes there from what Michael Pittman Jr. had to say? Obviously a guy that's well-respected, a team captain, played through an injury just like Julian Blackmon did. And, it wasn't a great season for him, but Derek, to his credit, he played through it, even when I think a lot of people thought his season might be done or very short. Michael Pittman Jr. played through it, and I think really proved that, like, he's a guy that you want to build around because he's willing to put his body on the line, even when he probably, honestly, could have mailed it in, Derek. He really could have, but he chose not to because he cares about this team so much, and he wants to lead by example. So what were your kind of thoughts on some of what Pittman had to say in regard to, because it seems like you just hear these kind of subtle shots they're not naming players, they're not naming people, but you hear them kind of speaking to that lack of accountability and that lack of culture about just players who want to do this and act like they're this, but Derek, they're not when it truly matters. What are your thoughts on that, what Pittman had to say?
Yeah, it was another thing too. Defo had said about Michael Pittman. He's said that was one tough SOB. He's like, that's the kind of effort that I need from guys when when things are getting tough. He said that's when I know that a guy like that is going to be committed. You're right. I mean, he had a back fracture, bro. Like, I mean, that's tough to deal with. And you and I even said it. Like, it felt like a lot of times midway through the season, it felt like Michael Pittman was clearly not himself, and it was clearly hurting his game. Maybe he got more complacent with it as time went along, and maybe that's why the numbers started picking back up again as time went along. But, a couple things about some of the comments. Obviously, Michael Pittman, certified dog for sure. Be able to play with that serious of an injury and only miss, I think, one game during that whole span. So pretty dang good. And like you said, everybody wants to be a dog until it's time to do the dog stuff. You're right. Like, everybody wants to pretend like there's something, but until, you actually face some real adversity, that's when you find out who the real guys are. And, I feel like, Cody, it's kind of funny because, like, remember a few weeks ago, Pat McAfee was talking about, like, the few players that he wants on the team and a few guys that he doesn't, or like everybody else just kick him to the curb. He brought that up here with, Pittman is a certified dog. Nelson is one of those. Buckner is one of those. And contrary to Pat McAfee's point of view on it, Pittman pointing out Jonathan Taylor as one of them too. So, we're kind of getting like this list of like core guys that are there that are like the dogs of the group. And like, obviously, because Pittman wouldn't have suggested Nelson, JT, and Buckner deserving his best, even when he doesn't feel up to it, if he didn't feel like that was important to say. So right now, these guys are kind of like, without directly naming everyone, they're naming the few guys that they actually do admire and respect the hell out of. And when you talk about these four players, Michael Pittman is one of them.
Yep, 100%. And that's great to hear that from Pittman, and hear from some of your captains who are being completely honest and raw about where they are, and they're not holding back the punches right now. None of these guys are going to call out players individually, but Derek, we kind of know based off of what we've seen and not seen. I mean, you've seen it all year on the defensive side of the ball, and even on the offensive side of the ball in some cases, Derek. There's almost just like this lack of effort at times as well. Like, say all you want about Matt Eberflus and his defense before, but Derek, I will give Matt Eberflus this. His defense was, you remember the whole loafs thing, right? His defense cared about running to the football, everybody there. If you are jogging, you are going to pay the price. You're going to get called out for it. And it just seems like, Derek, this last year, there were players who were loafing a lot, right? Players who were not giving it 100%, whether that was on the field, whether that was off the field. Obviously, we are only able to see what's on the field, but it definitely does feel like, Derek, there were some players who weren't being held to that standard or weren't responding well to that standard, So good on them, good on the captains to call it out, and I'm hopeful that whoever this new defensive coordinator is that the Colts do bring in, that he listens to some of these guys, even if it's not a player that's on his side of the ball, listening to players like Pittman and JT and Nelson and some of those guys that, are so widely regarded and respected in the locker room. I think that would just go a long way for the Indianapolis Colts and trying to figure out how to kind of rebuild this defense in a lot of ways. So be interesting to see there, Derek, when it comes to that. But I know one of the guys that's been kind of under fire for a while now, Derek, and obviously we have held him as well under fire for, I think, legitimate reasons. Of course, Zaire Franklin, Colts fans, it's crazy, Derek, to see just kind of the rise and fall of Zaire Franklin from rising from being an undrafted, or I guess a 7th round pick back in the 2018 draft, being a special teams guy, and then emerging as a starter. Obviously had the tackle numbers and led the NFL in tackles this year. And then, all the stuff that happened with the beef between Pat McAfee, some of the off the field sort of stuff, even on the field sort of stuff. I mean, look no further than what he said in the Giants game. That kind of stuff, Derek, that's kind of put him under the scrutiny from a lot of fans, and maybe even some subtle shots from some of the veterans, some of those leaders that you just heard about. Again, they're not going to name names, but I think a lot of people, their minds instantly go to him. But he had something to say on Twitter that he actually posted today, and I'll read it here. He said, "Indy fans, listen, I made some mistakes. I let some things get to me that they shouldn't, and did some things I wish I could take back. But understand, my heart was always right, and I am a learn and be better because of it. Hashtag for the shoe." So, Derek, what was kind of your reaction to Zaire Franklin's tweet here today? And I know some fans were like, okay, like that's a good first step. Some fans are not buying it. They're like, get him off my team. You saw all the kind of wide ranges of responses here from fans, but what was your thoughts here from what Zaire had to say? Because he's been under fire from a lot of Colts Nation for some of the controversial stuff that's been happening really this whole season for him. So what was kind of your thoughts there?
Yeah, like you said, it's a start. It's a start. It's good to see, him take some accountability for that. I mean, you and I, we reacted to, what happened on Sunday. And, we were, especially me, I was so angry. I was just so angry at it because, I seen so many people just being like, "Oh, Pat McAfee takes shots too at him. Like, what's the big freaking deal? You guys are making it way too big a deal." It's like, I don't care if I'm making it a big deal. Zaire Franklin is a current Indianapolis Colt player. Pat McAfee is a former Indianapolis Colt player. He doesn't have Pat McAfee can do and say whatever he wants. Zaire Franklin is under a microscope because he is part of the team. And everything he does reflects on the team, not just himself, the team. And we kept saying it. It's stuff like this that once again shows that guys are focusing on the wrong thing. They're not paying attention to the important things, and they have their minds focused on doing other stupid things like that. And I can appreciate the fact that he went to Twitter and told people this. I will say it did sort of feel a little bit like half-assed in a way to me. It's like you weren't uber specific, which, again, anyone that's genuine is usually going to be like very specific about what mistakes they made, what they did wrong, how they're going to fix it. At the end of the day, actions will speak louder than words. Your words can say whatever you want, but until Zaire Franklin, stops embarrassing himself on his podcast and stops embarrassing himself on the field and starts taking some accountability there, then I'll start making it to where I'll respect Zaire Franklin again as a Colts player. Still on my shit list a little bit. Still wish that he would, be a little bit better with it. But at the end of the day, it's the next step forward. Just go out and prove it to everybody.
Yeah, I think it's just focus on you, focus on the team, focus on that kind of stuff. And not to say when you focus on you, you're making it about you, but focus on how can I be a better player? How can I be a better leader? I mean, Derek, that captain badge is there for a reason. It comes with responsibility, like it or not. It comes with that, and people are going to look at you. And if you're a captain and you're doing the things that happened this year, I mean, it's going to reflect negatively not just on you, but you said it, on your entire team. And it's going to lead to some of the stuff, some of the questions, some of the criticism. It just comes with it, right? So, I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt and say, hey, some lapse in judgment there. But like you said, actions are going to speak louder than words here. And I'm hopeful that that is the case. And also, whoever the Colts do bring in at defensive coordinator will not be afraid to call that crap out a little bit more. That would definitely be a positive thing as well. Because, I mean, Derek, it's been a thing all year. So there may still be those moments where that does happen, even if he is genuinely trying to work on it. He needs somebody who's going to, kind of be on it and be like, hey, none of that crap. Stop. He needs that. Everybody needs accountability, not just him. Every single person needs accountability, whether you're playing in the NFL or whether you're just on a podcast like you and I. Like, everybody needs that. You need people who are going to call you on your crap because we all have it. So I think that's just important, whether that's, getting some players in here that are going to do that, in terms of maybe a veteran linebacker that's going to come alongside and hold that standard, some more key defensive players, obviously the coordinator as well, all that kind of stuff, or even the position coaches that you're likely going to bring in on the linebackers. You need that. You just absolutely need that. So, yeah, all that to say, Derek, some interesting comments from all three of these players when it comes to the state of the Indianapolis Colts. And we'll see, man, what happens moving forward. And the Colts are going to have a lot of decisions to make, especially on that defensive side of the ball. I mean, Derek, it could potentially be a major shakeup on that side of the ball in terms of personnel. Obviously, you're going to have a new head coach. You're going to have a new, guy calling the shots here on defense. So we'll have to see what happens there. But hopefully, like I posted, kind of in response to that, I'm really hopeful, Derek, that this is a positive sign of things to come on that side of the ball in terms of accountability, in terms of some of the stuff that, you heard from Pittman, you heard from Buckner, you heard from Kenny Moore, and so many other players and even former players as well. All this stuff needs to be figured out here. And especially on the defensive side of the ball, there 100% has to be more accountability for this team moving forward. And hopefully, adding some players, subtracting some players, adding some new coaches in here will help with that on that side of the ball. But we'll have to see, Derek, moving forward what happens. But yeah, guys, that'll do it for some of the comments made by a few current Indianapolis Colts players. Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you haven't already, be sure to smash that like button, hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell, all that good stuff, so that you are in the loop when we drop fresh content just like this. What were your thoughts on the comments made by these three players? Let us know all those things in the comments down below. But guys, that'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, guys, go Colts.